So my paper is divided into 3 parts. In the first part, I want to briefly sketch the biggest civilian intelligence service, the Serviço Nacional de Informações. In the second part, I will try to give some insights into the relations between the civilian SNI and the military services. And in the third part, then I will conclude with some hypotheses. So, like most Latin American states, Brazil was under military authoritarian rule during the Cold War. The largest state of Latin America also had one of the longest lived military dictatorships. It lasted from 64 to 85. The Brazilian National Intelligence Services, SNI, was created in 64, shortly after the coup d'etat. So apparently the military found it necessary to have a strong and extensive intelligence service. The SNI officially was a civilian service. However, the military had the say within the structures of SNI, as several researchers have already pointed out. The service combined the tasks of domestic and foreign intelligence. That means these two areas were not institutionally separated. SNI was an important political instrument and turned out to be a kingmaker. So 2 former chiefs of SNI later became presidents of Brazil. So Emílio Medici and João Figueiredo were former SNI chiefs. Compared to other military dictatorships in Latin America, the Brazilian one seems to have been more benign. Many thousands of dead due to state terror in Chile and Argentina contrast with some hundreds in Brazil. However, there was systematic state terror. Estimates put the number of people that passed through the basements of Brazilian institutions of state security at 50,000. Of these, 20,000 were subjected to the violence of torture. The role of the SNI as one of the most important pillars of the Brazilian authoritarian regime has frequently been emphasized, and also its role in this whole, you can call it war machine or killing machine. However, at the same time, the military intelligence services continued to exist alongside the SNI or were relaunched and expanded. So in the following part, I will try to say a few things about the military intelligence. As I said, unlike on the SNI, there's comparatively little research on the military services. And there were 3 of them. Each branch of arms had one, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. The intelligence service of the Navy was called CENIMAR. The Army's intelligence was called CIE, which was the biggest. And the Air Force's intelligence was called CISA, Centro de Informações de Segurança da Aeronáutica. In general, all 3 of the military services produced the same or almost the same kind of intelligence. So there's little difference in the type of reporting. For instance, on supposedly subversive persons or events or groups and meetings. So the documents, if you look at the sources, the documents produced by the civilian SNI just look and sound the same as the documents produced by the military intelligence services. In most publications on the SNI, there is reference to the fact that the military intelligence services in a way competed with the SNI and among each other. So there were conflicts and of competences between all of them. And the military services apparently ignored the hierarchies and reported directly to the president on a regular basis. But as I said, since there is so little research on this matter, unfortunately, I cannot really characterize the competition and the wrangling among the secret services in more detail. However, there's a very interesting point that I would like to stress here. The 3 military services were created or renamed just when just when the time of the harshest repression in Brazil began. And the period of greatest repression with the most victims of murder and torture was in Brazil between 68 and 74. So CIA was founded in 67, CISA in 70, and CENIMAR in 71. And thus, if you look at the research or the history of the Brazilian dictatorship, the three acronyms CIE, CENIMAR, and CISA were among the most fearsome acronyms of the time. So they are very frequently made responsible, or they are frequently made responsible for the harshest torture and repression. And the reason for this might be that the military services work particularly closely with police executive departments, namely the CODGs, Centro de Operações de Defesa Interna. And these were the leaders in interrogation and torture. There's one monographic publication on the CENIMAR, which is unfortunately not very scientific, but in it, the methods of CENIMAR are closely linked to SS and Gestapo methods. So allegedly, the CENIMAR copied the methods and also taught them. And yeah, of all the three military intelligences, CENIMAR is the one which is said to be most violent in terms of torture and repression and persecution. What is safe to say is that the civilian SNI grew after the year of the harshest repression. From 74 on, President Ernesto Geisel propagated political détente, but rather than losing resources, SNI obtained even more. And the reason for this might be that at the time in which violence and torture had fallen into disrepute, it was easier for the military government to legitimize a strong civilian information service, which also existed in the liberal Western states, than a huge security apparatus or military services. So SNI became a refuge for hardline military personnel, and I imagine also from the military intelligence services, that had to disappear due to their actions during these dark years of repression. And the accommodation of military personnel from other institutions in the SNI was even given a name. It was called luxury funeral. It was also the case that the military intelligence services were apparently constantly renamed and restructured during the military dictatorship. Some of them were renamed every year or every second year. So, and they were also dissolved earlier than at the end of the dictatorship. And the SNI had much more continuity. It also existed under the same name from 64 to 1990. So I would like to come to the third part, the conclusion, with some hypotheses. The production of intelligence and the reporting of the services, civilian and military services, did not differ fundamentally, neither in content nor in the addressees. But while SNI kept more of a civilian face in more than one sense of the word, the military intelligence services were also there, seemed to have been there for the dirty work, and were more likely to carry out or prepare torture to obtain information. This is mainly due to their close cooperation with the CODGs, the Centers of Operation for Internal Security. So the military services had their heyday precisely at the time of the harshest repression, between 68 and 74. After 78, when the slow opening of Brazil was imminent, the importance of the military intelligence services continued to decline. And the SNI, on the other hand, became a refuge for those people who came out of other institutions with dirty hands. This is not to say that SNI was not involved in murder and torture, But this is to say that there seems to have been a sort of division of labor. So torture to obtain information was always more associated with the military intelligence services and less often with the SNI. Thank you for your attention.